What is the fastest you have ever seen a new coworker get fired? This was a while ago at my old job. New guy gets hired as a busboy. He was super annoying and tried to insert himself into everyone's conversation whether they wanted him there or not. It only took a couple of hours for the whole restaurant to hate him. I was working the bar and he kept eating the bar fruit. I personally didn't care, but the manager did. Manager comes over and tells him to stop eating the fruit. He looks the manager in the eye and eats another piece of fruit. Manager says, "Really?" Followed by, "Come with me to the office." New guy promptly replies with, "All right man, calm down. I can tell you got that big dick energy for a good reason," followed with cliché wink and nudge from his elbow. In front of me and like 4 other employees. I wanted to slam my face into the ice bin, it was so cringy to witness. He promptly walked out the front door 10 minutes later without his uniform on anymore. The worst thing about it was the manager was an insanely laid-back guy. Hell, the whole restaurant was insanely laid back. You really had to try hard to get fired from this place. Had he not thrown in that big dick line, I'm almost positive he would have just gotten a slap on the wrist and kept the job. I got hired as a long-term temp with one other person to do some basic data entry work at a major brand pretty much everyone has heard of. And it was at their corporate headquarters, so pretty prestigious. Anyway, we went through all of this onboarding stuff in the morning that required us to get photo IDs and figure out parking and all that stuff. Then after 2 or 3 hours we were introduced to one of the employees in our new department who began going over what we were going to be doing. None of it seemed overly difficult and I figured that while it was new system I had never used before, I'd be able to work it out in a few days as long as I asked questions and took notes. And that was the thing that made me realize that the other person who got hired with me probably lied on her resume and was completely out of her depth. She didn't take any notes and didn't ask any questions. And whenever I glanced at her I could see flashes of panic on her face. Well, lunchtime came and when we came back she said that another company had called her and offered her a permanent position and she couldn't work with us longer. Both me and the person training us knew what was going on, but I'll give the other lady credit for finding a way out without losing face too badly. The takeaway here is, yes, fake it until you make it can and does work. But you gotta be able to fake it. You can't fake faking it. Where to begin? One person didn't show up for their second day citing culture shock and then spent at least an hour each day complaining about everything to HR. They were gone inside of a month. Some other bloke refused to follow processes and called his manager an irrelevant woman in team meetings. Gone within a week. My favorite was technically a new coworker from my perspective only, as I'd only just become aware of their existence. They interpreted "we're going to retire that server from production" as "we're going to throw the hardware off of the roof into a skip," and proceeded to head down to the data center, power the thing off in the middle of the day, drive to his friend's office, plug the box in and deploy a bunch of IVR scripts he'd derived from our proprietary scripts so they could run a bunch of psychic and sex hotlines. He was gone within 10 minutes of getting that server back. Sounds like an engineer my company hired. He was a PhD and really hit it off with the guys in management. Had some female colleagues working under his direction, and he was an absolute dick, demeaned their work, blamed them for things not working. Now my colleagues were excellent formulation chemists. He was brought on to lead a new formulation project and it wasn't working. He would tell them how to do it and it never worked, he kept blaming them for doing it wrong. My coworker got fed up and called him on his bullshit during a big meeting with a prepared presentation describing what they tried, how thoroughly they tried it, why what he proposed would never work, and an alternative solution. He was pissed, but the management guys were extremely knowledgeable and started asking him questions, and it was clear he couldn't answer. Turns out, his wife has a PhD too, and she pretty much did all of his degree work for him, both from a culture where women are not treated equally. He knew absolutely nothing. Not only that, but once everyone got to talking, It was clear just how massive an asshole this guy was. Sadly, my colleagues had to deal with this for months before everything was said and done. Spent my summers in college working as a laborer for a construction company. Anyway, we were doing a bunch of renovation in an active hospital, so noise and dust were a huge concern. We were a small crew and just starting renovations on an area with a super tight schedule, so the company hired a subcontractor for some of the work. Enter these two clowns who show up to do some demolition work. Foreman gives them the talk about how they may be used to doing things a certain way, but this is an active hospital, so he'd rather the work take longer than for them to make a huge mess or a lot of noise. An hour later, we apparently got multiple complaints about the noise and the mess, so the foreman calls me up and says to go over there and clean up now, and that he'd be by shortly to see what the hell was going on. These dudes had dust and broken wall everywhere. I could hear them halfway down the hall, just smashing away without a care in the world. The foreman shows up and we walk into the room to witness this dude standing on a pile of rubble swinging a sledgehammer over his head at a brick wall that he's removed the bottom from. Somehow the rest of this wall is still hanging from the ceiling, I have no idea how. Guy wasn't even wearing a hard hat, apparently oblivious that at any moment that wall might give way and crush him. The foreman lost his fucking mind on these guys. Kicked them out immediately, and got on the phone with their company and told them he didn't want to see these guys on site again. Lots of choice four-letter words were used, even threatened to fire the subcontractor entirely and get someone else to do the work. See, I owned a construction business and we recently hired 3 new employees due to expansion. I didn't get to meet them yet as my business partner was the one who interviewed them and watched them get started on the first day and would check in on them most mornings. Along with the new hired, we promoted one of our best workers to manager to oversee them. So after a few days I noticed that we were behind schedule on the job. This wasn't all that surprising because we had the new hires, but I decided it's best to go in and check it out to make sure everything was going well. So I call up my manager and tell him to go to a different site. We did multiple sites each day, and that I will take over at the place with the new guys. I arrive at the site half an hour late due to traffic and everyone is already hard at work, and in fact they are working efficiently and correctly on everything. I ask them a few questions about what they are doing and so on and get all the right answers. I figured the delay was just the first 2 days of learning and am very pleased that everything was picked up and seemed to go well. Now it is important that at this point I didn't actually introduce myself and nobody asked who I was, so it seems everyone just assumed that I was just another worker from the company they never met before. So 2 hours before we are supposed to finish for the day, a guy comes over and says, "Hey, just so you know, we're all gonna head out now, but clock in that we worked the whole day." Manager allows it, and the owners never notice. My document processing clerk was getting married and going on his honeymoon, so I got a short-term temp. It wasn't a temp to hire, everything was out in the open through a legit temp agency who generally did pretty good screening. The temp's very first day, they show up with a box of things, photos, mugs, office equipment, pen cup, task light, etc., stuff to decorate a cubicle with. I advised them not to unpack, we were getting right into training. Within 2 hours after I cut them loose on a computer with a "let me know if you need anything or have any questions," they said, "This mouse is hurting my wrist. It gave me carpal tunnel. I'm going to need workers' comp paperwork." I made an immediate call to the agency ending this contract, then told the temp, "Your paperwork is at the temp agency office, go ahead and go see your rep there." They left their box of stuff behind, I had to have the temp agency come pick it up. My sister was fired one day one. My dad had his own small medical practice and would hire me and my sisters as our first job to be his receptionist and file insurance claims, so we could get some workplace experience before we went job hunting in the larger world. My older sister worked for him in high school for a year. I worked for him for 2 years, then it came time for my younger sister to take over. I brought her to work to start training and said the number one rule in the office was, at work he's not dad, he's the doctor and the boss. She sassied him in front of a patient her first day, with all the venom and sarcasm a teenage girl can muster when dealing with a parent asking her to do something. He fired her on the spot and I had dragged her out of there. Mom told her at least she'd get paid for the couple of hours she managed to be employed. Edited, my first wholesome award. Thanks. This happened last week. New girl is hired and right off the bat starts telling me that she regrets taking this job, despite being unemployed for 4 months, because there are so many new people, so it must be a bad job because high turnover. Not really true. We just got bought by a large company and they are hiring more people because we have more business. She tells us all about how it's her birthday and she's going drinking after work. Does a no-call no-show the next day, which is her third day. We all assume she quit. But the next day she comes in and starts just trying to work like nothing happened. The supervisor asked what happened and she said she got in a minor car accident. He asked why she didn't call and she said she doesn't have a cell phone. Despite being on her cell phone constantly in the office. He decided to give her one more chance but gave her a lecture about how she needs to communicate properly about missing work, and one more incident will be an automatic firing. Next day no call no show. This happened last week. New girl is hired and right off the bat starts telling me that she regrets taking this job, despite being unemployed for 4 months, because there are so many new people, so it must be a bad job because high turnover. Not really true. We just got bought by a large company and they are hiring more people because we have more business. She tells us all about how it's her birthday and she's going drinking after work. Does a no-call no-show the next day, which is her third day. We all assume she quit. But the next day she comes in and starts just trying to work like nothing happened. The supervisor asked what happened and she said she got in a minor car accident. He asked why she didn't call and she said she doesn't have a cell phone. Despite being on her cell phone constantly in the office. He decided to give her one more chance but gave her a lecture about how she needs to communicate properly about missing work, and one more incident will be an automatic firing. Next day no call no show. We got a new contract for 2 receptionists to sit at our front desk. The company did not send their sharpest knives in the drawer because it was a low-dollar contract for only 1 year. You could consider the positions temporary. They sent a guy that my security manager called Sticks. He was incredibly malnourished and thin. We had a front door that was double door paned glass. I always exited through the side door and would look in through the glass doors every day when I left for home. On Sticks's second day, I looked in through the glass at the dark reception area and saw one of the office chairs behind the reception counter as it slowly spinned. I entered back in through the side door and came into the back of reception. I found Sticks laying on the floor with an ergonomic office chair that had fallen on top of him. His head was bleeding from where he struck the floor or some other object. Also, in my peripheral vision, I saw a can of compressed air, the type for cleaning keyboards. Sticks said he was perfectly fine. I helped him up and sent him home. Over the next few days, other admin folks reported to me that they kept finding Sticks collapsed in the reception area when no one had been around. I finally called his corporate supervisor to come take him away. When the supervisor arrived, Sticks had locked himself in the supply closet and refused to talk to me. I could hear him huffing air behind the door. The supervisor talked to him through the door and finally escorted him back to company headquarters. Let's call the guy, F, forgot because I don't remember his name. We had a group orientation our first week at a new job. First day there is a blizzard. It wasn't a surprise, we all knew it was coming, so we all plan accordingly and are 5 to 10 minutes late. Even our boss was 15 minutes late. F shows up 2 hours late. F claims there was an accident and he had to help a woman and child out of a car. Boss rolls his eyes and gives him the benefit of the doubt, We proceed with orientation. F is constantly interrupting the presentation since he worked with a similar company previously and he felt he knew everything. In between his interruptions he kept constantly needing to go to the bathroom. We are taken out to lunch, where F makes everything about him and belittles the female moderators who took us to lunch. After lunch we have individual training on our computers that will take a couple hours. F falls asleep. Moderator wakes F up and he can't focus on any of the tasks, yells at her that it's nonsense and there's no way she'd be able to do it. F demands she prove that she can do the work. She tells him she doesn't need to prove anything to him and that everyone else is well past where he is at. F continues to yell and is escorted out. When another employee comes to get his things for him, they open his water bottle and it stinks of booze. He's fired that afternoon. The next day, day 2, our boss tells those of us who were early how F called him the night before crying and arguing that he did nothing wrong. Shortly after telling us the story, F shows up. He has no memory of the previous day or more importantly being fired. He again is escorted out. I worked in a restaurant for my first job in high school. I was about 16 when we hired on my CO worker/buddy's little cousin. This kid was a year younger than me and a total shithead. No one liked him because of his attitude and behavior issues. Anyways, kid gets hired and at first he's chill. Him and I both loved the same band so we had a mutual bond and common thing to talk about. Other than that, couldn't stand him much. But during his first week he starts to step on people's toes quite easily because he notices some of us who are friends liked roasting each other and he thought he could join in, but the comments he was making wasn't silly banter, it was full-blown rude comments that made some of us mad and get selective over when we joke back and forth with each other. We also started to notice this kid didn't do his job properly either. He worked dish pit, when working alone, and his lack of proper cleaning of dishes, cutlery, and etc. threw everyone behind on their closing tasks cause we'd have to ask him to rewash everything due to food chunks being all over things. After 2-3 weeks a number of us complained to management. This kid's older cousin even complained about him, it got so bad. The last straw I think for him was taking this dishwasher sprayer and started to spray people as they walked into the kitchen. He got screamed at by a number of us and was fired a few days later when it was brought to management and noticed how angry all of us were with this kid. Backstory: I met a dude through another dude, and he and his pregnant girlfriend had nowhere to go. I had an insane amount of acreage and I felt bad for the guy, so I let him stay in his RV on my land, and I even hooked him up to running water and electricity, all of which I paid for. He had a part-time job delivering furniture and never made enough to pay me the paltry $100 he promised to pay me every month for helping them out. When I'd confront him, he'd tell me he just never worked enough hours to provide for his girlfriend and pay me. I mean, I'm sure the copious plumes of marijuana smoke coming from his RV, which was tiny, and contained his pregnant GF, didn't help matters. I blazed too. This isn't a judgment on token, but a judgment on not paying your rent before toking. So, proactively I got him a job at the hardware store I was assistant manager at until I finished my degree. This was 11 years ago. He came to work, and after 2 hours on his first day, just left. Like walked out, went back to the RV which was parked next to my house, and never said anything and never returned. Told me it was a bullshit job that was beneath him. It seriously ruined my reputation at that store, and luckily that wasn't my career path or anything. So after this all happened, I obviously confronted him. I'm short but that's never stopped me. Since he was like an entire foot taller than me he tried to be intimidating but it didn't work. I don't throw the first punch and he backed off when he realized I wasn't falling for his shit but wasn't going to start a physical altercation. He angrily uncoupled everything, knocked down some trees with his RV and took off. I figured I'd take the loss and be done with it, but 2 days later while I was at work our house was broken into and robbed. Almost as if someone knew the back window was easily jimmied open. We reported it to police, who told us there was really nothing we could do. I was 25 at the time and dirt poor, and he stole our Nintendo says, savings, games, and my roommate's alcohol and coin collection. I had to sell so many things I still had to replace those says. Well, sometime after we found out he was on the registry for sex offenders, because when he was 26 he diddled a 14-year-old girl, and he never disclosed that fact. There is some small comeuppance, though not much. When I worked years later as EKG technician, I was often tagged into interviews to see if the person interviewing was worthy of the program, and he had applied. In a room with just him and my boss, I was like, you know, this guy is on the registry, right? And I can personally attest he is a thief. I have never seen someone turn so red and then shame walk away. Never got my money or stuff back though. See him once in a while because he lives in the same town as my parents. He's useless trash. Feel bad for the then girlfriend, now wife though, and his daughter, because yeah,